It started with silence, not the peaceful kind, the heavy kind, the kind that makes your stomach twist because you know it's coming. I stood in the living room, heart pounding through my chest, holding the letter I never thought I'd write. "I'm dropping out of law school," I said. My voice, barely a whisper, but in that moment, it felt louder than a scream. My dad didn't say anything right away. He just stared at me. Like I wasn't his son anymore, like I was something broken. Then he snapped, "You're a disgrace. Get out." He didn't ask why. Didn't care that I'd spent months depressed, questioning everything. Didn't care that law school made me feel like I was drowning slowly every day. To him, quitting meant weakness. To him, failure was a disease, and I had just infected the family. I tried to explain. "I have a plan. I've been building something. An app. I think it could really..." But he cut me off with a laugh. "An app? You threw away your future for some stupid app." His voice dripped with disgust. "You'll come crawling back in 6 months, broke and begging. Just watch." He pointed at the door. Didn't even let me pack properly. Said if I was man enough to ruin my life, I was man enough to live with the consequences. I walked out with one bag, a cracked laptop, and a heart full of something that burned. Shame, yeah. But also, something else. Something louder than his voice. A voice in my own head saying, "Prove him wrong." The air outside felt different. Colder. Like the world knew I had nowhere to go. I stood on the front lawn for a minute. Just standing. No plan. No home. Just the echo of my dad's voice ringing in my ears. "You'll come crawling back." I didn't cry. Not then. I think my body was too numb. Too focused on staying upright. I got in my beat-up Honda Civic, tossed my bag in the back, and drove. Nowhere in particular. Just away. I ended up parked behind an old 24-hour gym. Not because I was working out, but because the Wi-Fi reached the parking lot. And the showers were open to members. So I bought a 1-month pass, slept in the car, showered before sunrise, $8 menu burgers and instant noodles from the gas station. That was my life now, from law school, libraries, and quiet dorms, to coding on my laptop with frozen fingers and coffee from a vending machine. Every night I stared at my screen, building, fixing, tearing it all down just to start again. I didn't know if my app would work, didn't even know if it should. But I knew one thing. If I went back now, if I gave up, he'd be right. And I couldn't let that happen. So I kept going. I pitched strangers at cafes, emailed small investors who never replied, posted on forums, tweeted to the void. Most people ignored me. Some laughed. One guy told me to go get a real job and stop embarrassing myself. But then, one night, around 3 a.m., something changed. I was coding at that same diner I always went to, the only place that didn't kick me out for buying 1 cup of coffee. And that's when I met her. Her name was Mel. I didn't know that at first. I just knew she was sitting across from me, scribbling something in a notebook, glancing up now and then. I had my headphones in, drowning out the world with some old rock song, fingers flying across the keyboard as usual. But then, she spoke. "Excuse me," she said, her voice soft but direct. "You're working on a startup, right?" I looked up, caught off guard. She wasn't some random college student asking about my code. This woman had a certain presence, a confidence that made me hesitate before answering. Yeah, I replied, shifting awkwardly. "I'm building an app, trying to get it off the ground." "Trying?" She raised an eyebrow. "Your words say you're failing." I blinked. I'd barely said anything about failure, but I guess she could tell. "Look," she said, setting down her notebook. "I can help. But first, show me what you've got." I didn't know if I should laugh or run away. Here I was, half-starved and barely able to pay for my coffee, and this woman, this stranger, was acting like I had a shot at changing the world. But something about her made me pull up my app, showing her the code, the design, everything I'd been working on in the dead of night. She didn't laugh. She didn't mock me. Instead, she listened. She asked questions, she pointed out the flaws, but not harshly, more like a mentor than a critic. When I was done, I sat there waiting for her to say something. Something about how this was a waste of time, how I should give up. But then she did something unexpected. She leaned back in her chair, smiled, and said, "I think you're on to something." It's rough, but it's got potential. My heart pounded in my chest. I couldn't believe it. I'll tell you what, she continued. There's an event tomorrow night. I want you to come. Bring your prototype. I'll introduce you to some people who can actually make this work. I could barely speak. You really think this has potential? I stammered. She gave me a look, like of course I do. Let's find out. The next night I showed up, nervous, shaking, wearing the best jacket I had, which wasn't much, and I met the people she promised. I didn't know it then, but this was my turning point, the moment when everything changed. The days bled together. I didn't care. I didn't want to care. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. The cabin was small, tucked away at the edge of a forest. The walls creaked with the wind, but it was peaceful, quiet. I spent my mornings walking along the trail behind the house, the ground damp with the early morning mist, the air crisp and clean. It was like I could breathe for the first time in years. I didn't check my phone. I didn't check my emails. No more meetings, no more deadlines. Just me, the trees, the birds, and the silence. And yet, the silence was deafening. It wasn't the kind of peace I had imagined. I thought it would feel like a reward, like everything would suddenly make sense, but it didn't. I thought I'd be happy, you know. I thought I'd find joy in the simplicity of it all. But the truth, it felt hollow. I sat on the porch one evening, staring at the sunset. It was beautiful, I'll give it that. The kind of beauty that makes you feel small in the grand scheme of the world. But as the sun dipped below the horizon, I felt a deep ache in my chest. Where was he? What was he doing? The man I raised. The boy I held in my arms, the one who used to tell me everything. And I never really listened. Had I failed him that badly? Had I really become a burden? The wind whispered through the trees like a voice calling me back. But I didn't move. I couldn't. Days turned into weeks. The world went on. And still, I sat there, alone. I kept telling myself I made the right choice, that I needed to let go. But deep down, something inside me still couldn't. One morning, I woke up to a knock on the door. I froze. I hadn't had any visitors since I arrived. Who could it be? I opened the door, half expecting it to be some kind of sign. But it was just a letter. No return address. No name. Just a simple white envelope with my name scrawled on it. I tore it open, heart racing. Inside was a photo, a picture of him. Standing in front of a shelter, he was volunteering. It was a simple thing. Just a picture. No words. But it was enough. Enough to send a chill through my bones. I turned the photo over. There, written in barely legible handwriting, was the only message he'd ever sent me since I left. I'm trying, Dad. My heart stopped. I sat down on the porch, the letter still in my hands. Trying. That was all I needed to hear. Maybe there was hope after all. I didn't tell anyone, not at first. Not when we hit 100,000 downloads. Not even when the first big article on us was published. It wasn't because I didn't want to celebrate, but because I wasn't ready. I still had that voice in my head, the one that told me I was a fraud. The same one that kept me awake at 3 a.m., the one that made me question whether I could really do this. I was in the middle of a whirlwind. Fast meetings, endless emails, pitches to investors who wanted more than just potential. They wanted numbers, results, proof. Mel kept pushing me, guiding me through it all, but the pressure was suffocating. Every time we hit a milestone, there was always another one waiting ahead. And I had no idea how I was supposed to keep up. I remember the first time we made our first million. It was supposed to feel like a victory, but all I felt was exhaustion. I didn't know what to do with the money or the success. I wasn't sure if I even deserved it. One night, after a long day of meetings and contracts, I sat in my office. Alone, staring at the screen, watching the number in our bank account grow. It felt like I was chasing something I couldn't even define anymore. And then, my phone buzzed. It was from Mel. "We did it," she wrote. "You did it." I stared at the message for a long time, unsure of how to respond. I didn't need a celebration. I didn't need a big party. I didn't even need to tell my dad that I was right, but I knew I had to tell someone. So I did. I called my mom. I told her everything. How we had just sold our first product. how we'd raised a second round of funding, how, for the first time in my life, I felt like I was finally doing something right. She didn't say much, but I could hear the tears in her voice, and in that moment I knew, no matter how big this got, no matter how successful we became, this was the real win. But even in the silence of that success, I couldn't help but think of my dad, of the way he looked at me that day I walked out of the house, the anger still fresh in his eyes. Would he ever understand? Would he ever see me as something more than the son who had failed? I didn't know. But maybe, just maybe, it was time to go back. I never thought I'd go back. I'd spent so many nights telling myself that I didn't need their approval, that I didn't need anyone to see me differently. But there was this gnawing feeling, deep in my chest, the one that only comes when you've left things unresolved, when your past is still waiting to catch up with you. So, one day I drove back, not to the old house, I couldn't face that yet, but to the neighborhood, the one where everything had started. I parked down the street from my old house and just sat. I watched the cars drive by, the kids running around on the sidewalk, laughing. It was strange, seeing everything so normal, while I had changed. Or maybe I wasn't the one who'd changed. I took a deep breath and texted my mom, "I'm coming over." When she opened the door, her eyes widened, like she couldn't believe it. She looked at me, at my clothes, and back at my face, and then she smiled. "I thought you forgot about us," she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. I didn't know what to say. The words felt trapped inside me, like there was too much to explain. But I didn't need to say anything. She pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was home. But I wasn't just there for her. I was there because I needed to face him. My dad. The man who had made me feel like I wasn't good enough. The man who'd called me a disgrace. He walked into the room, and when he saw me, the tension in the air could have cut through steel. His face, stone cold, unreadable. I didn't know what he was thinking. Did he hate me? Did he regret what he'd said? Did he even care that I was standing here? For a long moment, neither of us spoke, and then he broke the silence. "I heard about the app, your company, the investors," he said, his voice flat, like he wasn't impressed. I didn't know what to feel, pride, anger. Instead, I just nodded. "Yeah," I said. "It's going well." "I'm sure it is," he said, his voice getting colder. "You didn't need to prove anything to me, you know. You could have just followed the path, the one that made sense, but you left. You failed." His words cut deep, but I didn't let it show. I stood up straighter. "No, Dad, you were wrong." His eyes narrowed. "You are wrong. I didn't fail. I built something. From nothing. And it's bigger than anything you ever thought I could do. I've succeeded. Without you." The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. For a moment, I thought he was going to yell, to say something cruel, but instead, he just stared at me, like I was a stranger he had never really known. And maybe, in that moment, I was. But I wasn't going to back down anymore. Not from him. Not from anyone. "I don't need your approval," I said quietly. "I never did. I've made it this far because I believed in myself, and that's enough for me." The silence between me and my father lingered, thick and suffocating. He didn't say anything. Neither did I. But in the pit of my stomach, something shifted. It was like I was standing in front of the person who had shaped me, yet I didn't recognize him anymore. I had grown, become someone else, someone who wasn't afraid to stand on their own 2 feet. And the truth was, I wasn't even sure if I wanted him to see me anymore. But then, he spoke. "I wasn't trying to hurt you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know how to deal with the disappointment. My eyes widened. Disappointment? I had spent so many years thinking it was me who'd let him down, but now, the truth was staring me right in the face. "Disappointed in me?" I asked, incredulous. "You're disappointed in me?" He nodded slowly, his gaze falling to the floor. I am. You walked away from everything we built, the family, the legacy." His words hit me like a punch to the gut. I wanted to lash out, to tell him everything I had endured, how hard I had worked to prove him wrong. But instead, I just stood there, staring at him. And then, I realized something. Maybe he didn't know. Maybe he couldn't see how much I had sacrificed, how much I had lost just to get here. Maybe, just maybe, he didn't understand that it wasn't about him at all. It was about me. It was always about me. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in years, I said something I never thought I would. I wasn't walking away from you, Dad. I was walking towards something I had to do for myself. He looked up at me, a flicker of something, regret, in his eyes. I had to leave. I had to find my own way. I couldn't keep living in your shadow. For the first time, I saw the vulnerability in his eyes, and it felt like everything had shifted. But just as I thought we might be reaching some sort of understanding, the door opened behind me. I turned quickly, my heart racing. It was Mel. Her face was pale and she looked like she'd been running. "What's wrong?" I asked, panic creeping into my voice. "I just got a call," she said breathlessly. "From the investors. There's a major problem with the deal. It's falling apart, and if we don't fix it in the next 24 hours, everything will crumble." I felt like the ground had just been pulled out from under me. Everything I had worked for, everything I had built, was on the verge of collapsing. I turned to my father, my mind racing. The last thing I expected was for him to say, "I can help." I stared at him, shocked. "Help? You?" He nodded, his face more serious than I had ever seen it. "I know people. I know how to fix this." I opened my mouth, about to protest, but then I stopped. Maybe this was it. Maybe this was the chance to finally prove to myself that I could make it, not just on my own, but with the right people by my side. Maybe it was time to finally make peace with my past. I looked at Mel, and without a word, she nodded. I wasn't sure how, but I was going to fix this. Somehow, together. The next 24 hours felt like a blur. The clock ticked relentlessly, every second pressing down on my chest like a weight I couldn't shake off. I barely slept. I barely ate. All I could think about was the deal, the investors, and the fact that my entire future, everything I had worked for, was hanging in the balance. Mel and I were on the phone constantly, coordinating with lawyers, digging through contracts, and trying to patch together the mess. My father, who had promised to help, was strangely quiet. Every time I looked at him, he was buried in his office, making calls and scribbling notes on paper. It was like he had slipped into his old world, the one I had left behind. But the more I saw him working, the more I realized something. I wasn't the only one who had spent years running from the past. He had his own demons, his own regrets. And yet, here we were, forced into the same battle, for the same cause. I couldn't decide if I hated it or if it was exactly what I needed. As the night fell, things started to fall apart. A crucial part of the deal had slipped through our fingers. I was pacing, trying to keep it together, when Mel called. "They're backing out," she said, her voice shaking. "They found another company. They're going with them. We're done." My stomach twisted into a knot, and for a moment, I couldn't breathe. I couldn't hear anything except the blood rushing in my ears. "Wait, what do you mean done? How? We were so close." But she was right. The investors were gone. Just like that. All the work, all the effort, gone in a single email. I stood there in silence for what felt like an eternity. And then, out of nowhere, my father walked into the room. He looked at me with something I hadn't seen before. Concern. A real, genuine concern. "Son, we can still fix this." His voice was low, steady. It almost felt like he wasn't just talking about the deal anymore. He was talking about us, the years we'd spent avoiding each other, the years I'd spent hating him. I turned to him, anger bubbling up again. "Fix it? How? We're finished." I threw my hands up in frustration. "We've got nothing left to work with. It's over." But then he did something I never expected. He sat down next to me, his voice softer now. "It's not over. Not yet." He paused. "I know what I'm doing. Let me help you." And in that moment, I saw him, really saw him for the first time in years. He wasn't just my father anymore. He was a man who had lived through his own failures, who had learned from them, and who, despite everything, was still willing to fight for something. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know if I could trust him again, but what I did know was that I couldn't do this alone. "All right," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "Let's do this. Together." And just like that, everything changed. The next few hours were a whirlwind of calls, meetings, and last-minute decisions. Mel and I worked together, digging into every corner of the deal, finding weaknesses and strategizing how to salvage what we could. But the tension in the room was palpable. It felt like we were walking on a tightrope and one wrong move would send everything crashing down. My father, ever the strategist, was a rock, calm, steady, and relentless. He wasn't just making calls anymore, he was orchestrating everything, pulling strings I never knew he had. For the first time in a long time, I realized how much he had given up for this family, how much he had sacrificed just to keep us afloat. But in the back of my mind, doubt gnawed at me. Could I really trust him? Could I trust myself to make the right choices? It was nearing midnight when I got the call. The investors. They were ready to make their final decision. I swallowed hard, my hands shaking. This was it. Everything we had worked for, everything we had fought for, was about to be decided in the next 5 minutes. "Do you want to take it?" Mel asked, her voice tense. I could feel her anxiety through the phone. "We've done everything we could, but we won't know for sure until the last minute." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "Yeah, let's take the risk." The seconds dragged by as I waited for their response, my heart pounding in my chest. And then, finally, "Mr. Carter," the voice on the other end said, "we've decided to go forward with the deal." I froze. A surge of relief flooded through me, but I didn't let myself react. I had to stay focused. "We're in," I said quietly, barely believing the words. "We did it." But before I could even let out a breath of relief, my father's voice interrupted. "We didn't just do it. You did it. This is your win. Don't forget that." I turned to look at him, and for the first time, I saw him clearly. No walls, no barriers. Just a man who had, in his own way, been fighting the same battle I had. The battle to prove himself. "You were right," I said, my voice tight. "I couldn't have done this without you." His eyes softened, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. "You did it yourself, son. Don't ever forget that." And in that moment, everything changed. Not just the deal, but the way I saw myself, the way I saw him. We weren't father and son anymore. We were two people who had fought their own wars, and now, we were standing on the other side of it, together. The phone buzzed in my hand. It was an email from the investors confirming the deal. I looked at it for a moment, and then I shut the phone off. I didn't need to see the details. I didn't need to check the numbers, because in that moment, I knew it wasn't about the money or the success. It was about the journey, the struggle, the understanding that came from finally facing the truth. I turned to my father, a smile breaking through my exhaustion. "We made it," I said, and this time, it was more than just about the deal. It was about us. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was a disgrace. I felt like I was exactly where I was meant to be. The morning after the deal closed, I sat in my office, the weight of everything settling on my shoulders. The adrenaline had worn off, and now, all I felt was exhaustion. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling, letting everything I had just experienced wash over me. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short time. Mel had already left for another meeting, her energy infectious as always, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still unresolved. Something deep inside of me that wasn't ready to let go. Not yet. I stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city below. It was a clear day, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could finally breathe. But then my phone buzzed. It was a message from my father. "Son, come by the office when you get a chance. We need to talk." I froze. I had no idea what he wanted to say, but I knew one thing. It wasn't going to be easy. I drove to his office, my heart pounding as I approached the building. The same building where I'd spent so many years resenting him. The same building where our differences had been forged, our relationship tested. But now, it felt different. Now, I was walking in with a new understanding of who I was and who he was. I entered his office and he was sitting at his desk, the same man I had known my whole life, strong, unyielding, but now with something new in his eyes, something softer, something real. "Sit down, son," he said, his voice steady. I sat across from him, waiting. And then he spoke the words I never thought I'd hear. "I'm proud of you." My breath caught in my throat. Proud. After everything. After all the years of conflict and disappointment. I didn't know how to respond. "I know I wasn't always there when you needed me," he continued. "I know I pushed you too hard, tried to make you something you weren't. but I'm proud of the man you've become. You've done what I couldn't." I didn't know what to say. The weight of his words settled over me, and for the first time, I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. "I didn't do it for you," I said quietly, looking him in the eye. "I did it for me. For who I want to be." He nodded. "I know. And I respect that. More than you know." There was a long silence between us, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was understanding. And then, just when I thought the moment couldn't get any more intense, my father did something unexpected. He stood up, walked over to me, and placed a hand on my shoulder. "I may have missed a lot, but you've made me see something. We're not so different, after all." My heart skipped a beat. He was right. We weren't so different. We had both spent years fighting our own battles, trying to prove ourselves in a world that never gave us the credit we deserved. We had both struggled with our own fears and failures. But in that moment, I realized something. We didn't need to keep fighting. The battle was over. I stood up, finally understanding what it meant to be a man, not just in business, but in life. I had found my own way, and so had he. "We'll be all right," I said, my voice firm, and for the first time in years I believed it. As I walked out of the office, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. The past was no longer holding me back. The future was mine to shape. And no matter what came next, I knew one thing for sure. I was ready.